looking for confirmation through prayer and meditation, seeking to find your face.
I'm totally free.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Free indeed.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No more chains holding me.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Wanna sing hallelujah.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
I'm totally
Remember, waiting for man's opinion, dealing with their dominion, hoping they'd show me the way. I recall looking for confirmation through prayer and meditation, desperately seeking your face.
now I'm totally free.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Free indeed.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
No more chains holding me. Wanna sing hallelujah. I'm totally free.
Hearing your voice so familiar,
I hear you guys.
distantly close, a healer, calling me by my name. I recall looking for confirmation through prayer and meditation, desperately seeking your face.
Making me totally free.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Free indeed. No more chains holding me. Wanna sing hallelujah. I'm totally
Step go.
That is what you ordered. I am moving forward. I don't have to follow the crowd.
'Cause everywhere I move is holy ground. There's no need for me to turn around.
Teach me how to live my life complete. Teach me how to live my life indeed. Totally,
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 Good evening. Hello, Wichita. Hello, St. Mark. Hello to all of our friends here, near and far. Thank you for tuning in for another broadcast and edition of Ignite. And as you can see, I am as giddy as a kid in a candy store, or maybe as giddy as a kid in a toy store the month before Christmas. I don't know which one of those is more giddy, but if Kai Green were on tonight, I'm sure he'd give us a clear delineation of that as he makes fun of me. But I am super excited because of our guests and because of the conversation we're going to have. So let me tell you, if you are watching this broadcast right now, you need to tag some folks. You need to reach out and invite some folks to come on because we're about to have an amazing conversation with our guests as well as our co-hosts. Pastor Kyle and Pastor Yolanda are here with us as well. But we're about to have a conversation uh, with the amazing, the brilliant scholar, journalist, author, social justice advocate, Mark McCormick. And a lot of people claim to be scholars. A lot of people claim to be thinkers, intellectuals, thinkers. A lot of people claim to be social justice advocates. But Mark McCormick walks the walk and talks the talk. He is the truth. He is the truth. Every time I talk to this guy, I can take a subject that I've been thinking about for months and I'll share it with him. And within 2 seconds of me saying what I've said, he takes it and gives me an entirely different twist and perspective on it. And he does it. And he's not doing it intentionally. He's not, we're just talking. And it just happens again and again and again. And it's so fun talking to him. And we're going to talk tonight about the election results. We're going to ask him about his reflections on the results of the current, most recent election. The election coming up in 22 years. We know that Donald Trump announced his presidency again on yesterday, that he's going to run again for president. He announced it on yesterday. We're also going to talk culture. We're going to talk about 3 movies that have a Black presence, African-American presence. We're going to talk about The Woman King. We're going to talk about the movie Till that tells the story of Emmett Till in Mississippi. And we're going to talk about Wakanda Forever. So we're going to talk about those 3 movies and do some critical reflection on it and talk about what he's experiencing, what he's hearing, what he thought about it. And we're going to give you an opportunity to tune in as well. I cannot wait for us to talk about the movie Till because he saw it this today actually, and he was giving me earlier today some of his reflections on it, and it was just riveting. So I can't wait for us to get to that part of the discussion. And then we're going to talk just about why we're having this conversation at all. Why am I a pastor, a Christian pastor, a United Methodist, a pastor of a church here in the city? Why am I talking about movies, culture, politics? Why am I talking about that at all? Shouldn't I have a Bible in front of me and just be, reading the Bible and telling you all what the Bible means? Why am I having these kinds of conversations? And we're going to talk about that right as before we get into our discussion. So let me tell you, if you're watching on my Facebook page, please go to the St. Mark Facebook page and watch tonight's broadcast so that we can see your comments. If you comment on my profile, we will not see your comments. So we need you to go to the St. Mark Facebook page or YouTube channel so we can see your comments. You can talk back to us, talk with us. We can give you a shout out if we see your name pop up. Say hello to us so that we can say hello back. So you can do that on the St. Mark Facebook page and the St. Mark YouTube channel. When you go to those, go ahead and follow those. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Like the St. Mark Facebook page, and then you'll be updated whenever good stuff is happening at St. Mark. Speaking of good stuff, I'm going to bring on Pastor Yolanda, and we're going to tell you about some good stuff that's happening this coming Sunday. What's up, Pastor? How are you?
I am well. How are you?
I am doing well. Giddy. Did you hear me talk about that I'm feeling giddy?
I did hear that word giddy, and I'm going to make note of it, and Kai and I will discuss it upon Kai's return.
It isn't even allowable for a Black guy from Mississippi to refer to himself as feeling giddy. Is that even allowable?
Society would say no. You're supposed to have your head bowed.
Is giddy even appropriate for do manly? I'm not going to say myself a manly man, but do manly men refer to themselves with the word giddy?
I would hope so.
You think so?
I would hope so. Probably not, but I would hope that they could
Let's
I
ask.
said there's a season for everything,
There's a season for
time for
everything.
everything under
You
the
know
sun.
what? You know what? When Pastor Kyle comes on, we'll ask him. That's who we should ask, a manly man. Let's not speculate. Let's ask a manly man. Would he ever refer to himself with the word giddy?
Well, even if they don't, even if he doesn't, then you
I
just started a trend.
Okay, I'll
You
have
know,
enough self-esteem to do that without
we
needing.
are the community of possibilities and transformation. Let me help you help yourself, Pastor.
All right now. Okay, learning to integrate theology and perspective into your everyday arguments. All right. I can see you coming to the end of that
Abuse.
Pastor Kyle, I didn't think she was going to get there. I'm like, man, I'm not seeing the results of this.
You know, honestly, though, I am extremely proud of myself. I didn't think I would get to this point either. I fought. I had a battle in within myself, and of course throughout my seminarian journey, just being a rebel. And at the end of the day, it is what it is. And at the end of the day, being a practical person, it works. And if it works,
Hey, great theology is not speculative theology. It's the theology that gets applied to everyday problems and turns into life-giving truth for people. And so that's why I love this. I love the philosophical speculative theology, but only because I care about people and I care about the problems of our world. And thinking through those things helps me to think through the complex issues of our time. So congratulations, you're doing, plus also just, I want to encourage you because when I had the blessing, when I did seminary, I was 24, 25, no kids. Linda was working with Shell Oil, so I was able to go to school pretty much full time. So I didn't have to worry about a Robert Johnson, working with a Robert Johnson at a church. I didn't
pray
have
my
to worry
strength.
about having to work with a Kyle and Kai on Ignite on Wednesday. I wasn't a grandfather or didn't have a house. I didn't have any of that. I was just able to focus on school. So I was able to enjoy this academic environment and just suck it up without all the other distractions. But you have done the same journey with a million other duties. So you deserve kudos. All of you all out there at St. Mark, y'all send Pastor Yolanda some kudos and say, great work, girl. Great work. You working it. This is the season of Black woman empowerment. We're going to talk about 3 films tonight that spend a great deal of time celebrating Black womanhood. And I think it's absolutely awesome. You walk in movie theater buildings and you have the biggest 3 posters are posters with Black women on them. And they're making lots.
I'm loving that.
Yeah,
I'm loving that.
it's wonderful. So
Was
let's
that a way of explaining to your congregation of why Pastor Yolanda is distracted and not focused?
Pastor Kyle, did you tell Yolanda I've been talking about her? You told me you weren't going to tell her. That was supposed to be between. Oh my God. Oh my God. You know what? Let's make an announcement. I think this is a great time to make an announcement. And we have an important announcement before we bring on Mark and Kyle on this coming Thursday. We will do our I Am Thankful for You Thanksgiving celebration and worship service. We want you to invite St. Mark people you're thankful for, including your family, your friends, and others. And then we're going to do worship, and then have you can do free family photos and dessert reception. So we invite you to come out for our community Thanksgiving celebration. We are not pushing people to come back into the building necessarily, but there are some Sundays in the year that I think it's critical for a church to come together. And I think the Sunday before Thanksgiving is one of those Sundays. So I pray that all of you all that are watching right now, reach out to our church members, invite them to come back, encourage them, those that are a little hesitant because of COVID lingers. tell them to wear masks. We encourage people to wear their masks on Sundays, just to take an extra step of precaution. But let's come together on Sunday for that. And then let's move on. I want to bring on Pastor Kyle. Pastor Kyle, hello. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Hello, good. So, upon reflection, my therapist wife, would say that, Robert, your feelings are your feelings, whether they're giddy or you don't have to apologize. Feelings are neither manly nor feminine. They're just your feelings.
There you go. I knew Kyle was going to fix it. Hey, and it sounds like to me, Yolanda, isn't that wonderful? That's when you know a man loves his wife. He is learning her craft. He did that.
Yeah.
He just did that little thing just as well as someone who actually practiced the craft.
Who actually knew what they were talking about, like my wife does. Yeah.
Yes, you learn.
How long have you been married, Pastor Cobb?
20 years.
So 20 years by force, he has learned that he has no choice but to learn her craft.
No.
Well, I mean,
Linda Johnson would say it's been 33 years, and I still don't want to balance a checkbook. I look at a bank statement. So, no,
we
it ain't.
we have
Quantity does not equal quality.
Yeah.
Well, Kyle, it's good to have that. Before we bring on Mark, do you have anything going on special for around Thanksgiving that you want to let folks know?
No, we're not doing like a special Thanksgiving service, but for Advent, we'll be for our service, we will be going through various Christmas songs throughout Advent to take a look at some of their history and some of the meaning behind them, and it'll be interesting. I'm looking forward to that.
That's a great series. Wow, that is a great series idea.
And we also have the traditional second Sunday in Advent is Ugly Christmas Sweater Sunday.
Okay. Oh, wow.
So
that's another idea, Yolanda. Ugly Christmas Sweater Sunday. Yeah.
I will say that perhaps only at our church can we get away with that on Communion Sunday. It does feel a little bit odd holding the elements
in an ugly Christmas sweater.
Yeah, but it's fun. Our people love it, and it's a great time.
See, that's that stuff I rebel against. You should be able to serve communion in your ugly Christmas sweater.
Yes, well, we do.
Wearing your ugly Christmas sweater is neither bad or good. It's not manly or fit. It's what you want to wear.
Yeah.
So that same thing applies.
But don't try that at St. Mark, Pastor Johnson. Please don't try that.
We're gonna do ugly turtleneck sweater.
Ugly.
That's what we're gonna do at St. Mark. Everybody wear your ugliest turtleneck sweater, and we're gonna come in looking like we're all choking to death. Let's bring on Mark McCormick. Is an author. He currently works with the Kansas ACLU. He is the former director of the Kansas African American Museum. He is award-winning journalist, and again, social justice advocate, and a father, a husband. I will also say he doesn't talk about this a lot, but so I'll say it for him. He's good friends with the NFL great Hall of Famer Wichita, Barry Sanders. They're good friends. But it is a pleasure to have him on tonight. Mark McCormick, welcome to Ignite again, sir.
Thanks for having me.
Forgive us for all of our tomfoolery before.
No. Spirit of play is fun and important.
And it's important.
Yeah.
See, see stuff like that. Yeah. See what Mark does. That.
Well,
important, Mark. Yes.
Because I'm silly too. So looking for some affirmation.
Well, welcome, sir. So my first question for you, and then Yolanda, after asking this question, there's a question I want to address something before we get into the meat of our conversation. But Mark, how are you? How's your family? And what is energizing and exciting you these days?
Everyone's well. Since the last time I appeared on your show, my job here has changed.
Okay.
I'm now the deputy director for special initiatives here at the ACLU of Kansas.
Okay.
Which means I'm still kind of feeling my way through this job, but part of it is to diversify our membership, our donorship, and some of the things that we're doing. And what I've been working hammer and tong on lately has been what we're calling the Quindaro Society. And if you're unfamiliar with Kansas history, Quindaro was on the Underground Railroad. And yes, the Underground Railroad existed here in Kansas. And if you remember parts of your American history, there was a debate at one point about whether we would be admitting any states to the Union as slave states or as free states. And as this was happening, people who were abolitionists and were trying to help people get free from slavery, they started a little town on the river here in Kansas City called Quindaro. Missouri was a slave state, and Quindaro, that site was selected to help facilitate people escaping slavery. And the settlement was founded by Wyandot Indians, Black freedmen and freedwomen, and abolitionists from the East. It was our first and best and perhaps only example of a multiracial democracy. And here at the ACLU, we're trying to not just defend democracy, but expand it. So our Black Contributor Network will bear the name of Quindaro through that symbolism. And that's what I've been working on a lot lately. And we're actually going to have an event there in Wichita, December 1st, at my old stomping grounds at TCAM, 601 North Water at 6 p.m. If you'd like to come, just send me a message here at the ACLU of Kansas letting me know so that we can make sure that we have the appropriate accommodations for you.
Wow, thank you for that. And so we'll reshare that information before we close today. So folks who heard that and want to make sure they get that information. So Mark, I want to, I always like to map out conversations so our guests know I don't like to surprise. Guests don't like to be surprised, but I think you can do this with me because we do. So I know you well enough to know that you are a person of faith conviction, and that part of that faith conviction gets lived out through your passion for social justice. But you've also wrestled with the integrity of local churches and how they handle people, purely for not theological reasons, but purely for what the people dynamic, and sometimes how the people who are supposed to represent the heart of God, sometimes how we can be unkind to people in a way that drives people away. And we all know horror stories about it. Pastor Kyle can tell you. As a matter of fact, as pastors, Pastor Kyle and I can tell you that there are churches that get started primarily saying they're going after hurt church people, because that's a huge right. They're like, we're going after the unchurched and people who've been hurt by church. And I'm not saying that that's your story, but I know that in particular, but that you have struggled with the way sometimes church people. Would you just take a moment and talk about how though, in spite of that, your faith informs your passion for social justice and a kind of historically rooted social justice?
That's interesting. I grew up in church. My home church was Lincoln Montgomery's church, Tabernacle. I grew up on Volusia. And that's why the first chapter of Barry's book is Volusia's Calling. And it had two different meanings. If you're a young Black man in this society, the streets are always calling you. But we also have a calling in life as well. So the double meaning for that was on purpose. And so I grew up going to church, walking to church. I was in the Sunbeam choir, all that good stuff. And, my faith has always been important to me. When you raise a kid in church, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to stay in the church as soon as they're young adults.
Right.
So pretty soon, some things are going to start happening to you in life, and you call out for God, and then you fall back on all those foundational lessons that you learned at church, right? And I can't sing. That's not my gift. But I always felt like my ability to write was a gift. And I tried to treat it as a ministry. And even my Twitter handle, McCormick Voice, just means I want to be a voice for other people. And I am a juror, not the judge, but I'm a juror in the court of last resort. And that's just,
I love that.
That's just like, I'm the little drummer boy who was just, this is my gift. This is all I have to offer. This is what I want to give.
Wow. And you do it well. One of the things that I deeply appreciate about you, Mark, is you have an exceptional curiosity about people. Like you will.
That just means I don't know a whole lot.
But I'll name someone here in the Wichita community to you, and you'll say, you know what? Interesting thing about this person. Mm-hmm. And you'll show me a side of them. Never anything negative. It's always like, hey,
I thought we were going to keep what I was saying about Pastor Yo just
since Pastor Kyle, he didn't keep what I told him about Yolanda private. So we're just putting that all out there now. Everybody just putting it out. But I'll ask you, I said, man, I find so and so in the Wichita community. Man, I think that person is really great, super interesting. And you're like, but guess what? And then you'll like open up an entirely new dimension, and you do that only because you've taken the time to pay attention to people and to learn about them. And that is something that I think pastors should do. I think we should be we should be interested in people. But Mark, you have that. Where did that come from?
Well, if you really think about it, pastors are basically, ecclesiastical columnists. Wow. You have to spend the week writing, and you're trying to present something profound, something educational, something that touches people's heart, soothes their spirit. These workplaces can be really hard on people. And I just remember, I'd have a really difficult week, and I'd come to church on Sunday, looking for some of that spiritual gasoline. And I made it a point to take detailed notes, and I'd put them in my nightstand. And then during the week, when things got really difficult, I'd read the last sermon. Wow. And if it didn't work, I'd read the one from the week before and keep going until I felt better. Yeah. But you all are columnists. Wow. And, if there's any news, it'll probably be in the church, right? Yeah. And people are looking to you for analysis. And, that's what you do. And so some of this is training. Some of this is, being taken to church and being taught, and, Sunday school, church, all that stuff. It's in you. And I don't think it can really be taken out of you if it's put in there right.
Wow. So how young were you? And then Pastor Kyle, he's gonna ask you, because one of the questions we want to ask you is, I know that, I grew up in the Deep South, lived in the Southwest, and whenever I heard the acronym ACLU, it was spookified. People attached a lot of spooky stuff and spooky perceptions about. So I want to talk about what the ACLU is and sure. That it does. So we'll do that. But when did you notice about yourself that you were extraordinarily curious about people and stories? and people,
Um,
the stories of places?
well, I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but I have a sister who's about 15 years older than me. And when she was in high school there in Wichita, she went to Southeast. And she was the high school journalist of the year. The Wichita Eagle used to have a designation for high school journalists. And she won a scholarship to KU, where I ended up going. So, you know, before I started preschool, I was aware of what journalism was. I was aware of what KU was. And I had a sense for writing because, you know, my sister was almost like a parent to me. And when she left, there was, you know, just this kind of hole. And one of my earliest memories is my mother getting a letter from my sister Chan. Her name is Chandra, but we called her Chan. And I'd sit on the floor. My mother would sit on the bed and she would read me the letters. And I thought, wow, she can really write. I would like to do that someday. And so things just sort of developed from there. I mean, my sister was really, you know, the person I was patterning my professional life after. And my dad always said that she's more like him. She was more like him than any of the kids. And my dad and my sister are charismatic people. They make good conversation and they enjoy conversation. And if you're going to carry on a conversation, you have to be an active listener, right? You can't sit there thinking, okay, I'm going to say this when they stop talking. You have to engage what they're saying. And some of that is just my training over the years. And it was actually more difficult for me because I really am a very private person, kind of sealed up. I'm an introvert, you know, being in big crowds and having to interact with people kind of wears me out. But you learn how to do it. And I could always do it under the guise of being, well, this is Mark from the Courier Journal, or this is Mark from the Wichita Eagle, or, you know, this is Mark, you know, from this media organization, not Mark McCormick, you know, who grew up on Volusia. So some of it you just kind of pick up, and you have to if you're going to survive in that business.
Wow, you're such a great storyteller. I love, by the way, just FYI, I love the story. I think that's so precious for you to talk about what your sister meant to you and how you sat on the floor in her shadow, and she was your hero. She was the person you were. That is such a great.
My sister was a police officer too.
Wow.
And when she went through the academy, you know, they teach you to shoot guns with both hands, and she only had strength in her right hand. And they would require you to be able to hit targets with both hands. And she would stay nights and weekends training. And when she graduated from the academy, she had won the True Grit Award for that reason.
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, my sister could really, when I was growing up, my sister could do no wrong.
Wow.
She also took me to Disneyland and Magic Mountain and Universal Studios.
That's a great sister. That's a great
box. In the box right here next to my desk, she and I did a screen test at Universal Studios. I have the video right here. I'm copying it for her, and I'm going to send it to her.
Wow. Pastor Kyle, jump in and go where you want to go, Kyle. You don't have to do the Mark can handle it.
Well, I will say when you said I forget how you put it, but you know, that writing as a gift. I mean, it's the way I talk about spiritual gifts is because we have these spiritual gift inventories and things, like here's like the 10 spiritual gifts and which one are you? And I caution people against that because I think God gifts us in so many different ways. And when the things that we are passionate about coincide with the things that we're gifted at, but then also are used for God's glory and God's kingdom, that's spiritual gifts right there. Mm-hmm. And they can't be contained in a list of 5, 10, 15 gifts. I mean, I think there's so much more creativity to the Holy Spirit. And so
You
absolutely.
can't limit the Holy Spirit.
Absolutely. Writing is a gift of the Holy Spirit when it's used for the edification of God's kingdom. And so I love that. I love that that you're able to, that you've been able to utilize that. So, as Robert mentioned, to be honest, over the years, I haven't been really familiar with the ACLU, what it does, or really even had much of an association, positive or negative, to work with. So what has been your experience with the ACLU over the years in terms of kind of your understanding of it prior to entering into it, and then and now that you've been a part of it, what, knowing what it does and things like that, can you give us a better sense of what it does?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, in school, one of my favorite subjects was social studies. And the first time I heard about the ACLU, it had to do with Nazis marching through a Jewish enclave in a place called Skokie, Illinois. And the ACLU helped the Nazis exercise their First Amendment rights there. And, your First Amendment rights are supposed to be about not language that you're okay with, but, even hate language sometimes, and opinions that we disagree with. Because if you lose that right, then I lose it next, and then Robert, and then so on and so forth. That was my first sort of connection at all with the organization. But when I was at TCAM, I wanted the museum to be kind of an activist museum. I wanted to focus on the kinds of exhibits that really spoke to the kind of transformative change that I wanted to see in the world. For instance, we had a show about the Harlem Renaissance, and people have heard of the Harlem Renaissance, but I don't think they understand that the Harlem Renaissance was really called the New Negro Movement. It was an attempt to move away from these horrible caricatures that were being depicted of Black people, and that we had beauty, and that we had intelligence, and that we were more than just these caricatures. One of the last shows that I did was about the 50th anniversary of the Kerner Commission report. It was the riot report that President Johnson put out as race riots were going up across the country in the 60s. And one of the famous lines was that America was moving toward two societies, one white, one Black, separate and unequal. So there was this kind of activism about it, right? And so as luck would have it, I ran into the executive director of the Kansas ACLU. We were both speakers at a conference, and this is a very impressive person. And I wanted him to debate the district attorney there in Wichita. And I wanted to have the debate happen at the museum, and then I wanted it broadcast. And in the process of setting all of this up, the executive director of the ACLU, Dr. Micah Kubik, said, "Why don't you come up and be our communications director?"
Wow.
And because I went to school in Lawrence, I'd always wanted to live in this part of the state. And I really admire this person and wanted to work with him. And so, we picked up and moved up this way. And being inside the organization, I've learned that we're fighting on more than 90 different fronts, privacy issues, immigration issues. When babies were being ripped out of immigrants' arms on the border, the ACLU was there. When a man in Tonganoxie was arrested for moving into his own house, the ACLU was there. when students were being persecuted because of their hair, because they were wearing locks, the ACLU was there. We fight on all these different fronts. Voting rights. We're right now trying to end cash bail. We're trying to end juvenile fines and fees. What 14-year-old do you know with a job that can pay $4,000 or $5,000 worth of fines and court fees? So these are the kinds of things that we're doing. And to your earlier point about, and to your point too, Robert, about why people at times have looked askance. Well, it had to do with, defending the Nazis in Skokie. It had to do with defending the neo-Nazis in Charlottesville. And in many instances, it had to do with us fighting for the rights of individuals against the tyranny of the majority. So if you happen to be a Muslim student and there's a Christian prayer being forced on you in a regular school, that's not fair to that individual. So I think we might have unfairly gotten the label of, we're anti-Christian. Well, no, we're fighting for the rights that we were granted in the Constitution. Our client is the Constitution. So I think that's where those perceptions came from.
Wow. You have a follow-up, Pastor Kyle?
No, I think that's very helpful. I mean, a kind of helpful recap of kind of your own journey, but also even, your
Can I make a connection there? So, you were asking me before, I was talking about, whatever gift I was given and trying to make it something that could glorify Christ.
Yeah.
There's so many people who need help. As I said, my previous job here at the ACLU was director of communications. And so there'd be people who were in jail who needed help. They would leave messages on my phone, or there was an immigrant who needed representation and they need help. We have hundreds of people emailing us, calling us for a variety of issues because they're desperate and they need help. And we're able to do that. We're able to do that here. And in my own little way, I feel like I'm doing important work, important spiritual work through this, despite what people may feel about the organization itself.
And I think it is important work. I think we have to learn. My desire for people is to stop allowing labels to block us from relationships and from progress. It's so, and there are people who do this strategically. Whenever there's something that they don't want us to explore, they don't want us to see come together, they stick a label on it, and then they just manipulate that label. So liberal, whatever, fascist, socialist. And then once you stick the label on it and they market that label in a certain way, then all they got to do is just give you that label and they shut everything down. In the same way that, I've learned that when certain manipulators of our society, if there's an issue that people seem to be coming together on, they'll label that issue political. And once they said, oh, it's political, they're being political, then people start backing away because there's so many people that don't want the label of being political.
That's such a good point. I mean, there are few things as beautiful as a friendship that spans those differences.
Right. Yes.
And because of those labels, we'd be preventing those friendships from happening.
Yeah. Wow. All right. So, Mark, let's jump into this. You've seen The Woman King.
I have.
You've seen.
Are you talking about Pastor Yo, or are you talking about the movie?
Mark, that's very dangerous. See, Pastor Yolanda is on ego fast. She's on an ego fast right now, and we don't want to. Just like when somebody's fasting from sweets, you don't eat candy around them. Please don't say that.
Okay.
But she's on an ego fast right now.
Don't put off for tomorrow what you should do today.
Yeah, I saw that.
So the Woman King, you've seen.
Before you jump into that, we would be remiss if we didn't say hello to Karen Case. Do you mind?
Oh yes, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
yeah.
Yes, Miss Karen. Hello.
And her mom's online.
Yes.
She said
Hello,
hello.
mom.
Yeah, it's my
Hello,
adopted mom.
Allison Wells. Hello, Miss Wells. Thank you. I saw your message, by the way, and I do look forward to connecting with you. Don't know how that hasn't happened. I don't know what happened to our appointment, but let's get it rescheduled. But thank you all for tuning in. My sister-in-law, Cora, thank you for tuning in. Thank you all so much. So, Woman King, you've seen Wakanda Forever,
I have.
and you've seen just most recently, as recent as of today, the movie Till, about the story of Emmett Till. So I want to let's start with the Woman King and just take a few minutes. I want to get your reflections on each one, but then I want to talk about the movie Till. There's something I want to come back and I want you to share what you shared with me earlier today.
Okay.
But just give your immediate reflection on each one of those. And why do you think that this was a good time for those movies to be made? And why did they catch fire in this season?
There's an interesting connection to the Woman King and the larger conversation that we have been talking about having. There was a part of me that was just very happy for Viola Davis. Yeah. I was someone who did not like The Help.
Okay. Wow.
I did not like The Help. Melissa Harris Perry. I don't know if you remember her. She used to have a show.
Yes,
on
MSNBC.
And she did a marvelous analysis of The Help. And it reminded me a lot of the discussions we were having in the 80s about Cry Freedom, The Dry White Season, Mississippi Burning. Yeah. Where the wrong people were centered. Right. So we're talking about Mississippi, where you're from. We're talking about a time where the Federal Bureau of Investigation was following around civil rights leaders, trying to keep Dr. King from winning the Nobel Peace Prize because it would lend too much credence
to the movement,
the civil rights movement.
Right.
And then someone makes a movie where the FBI, not the Freedom Riders, but the FBI are the heroes of Freedom Summer. I just really had a problem with it. And Viola Davis was getting hammered because of her role in The Help. And it reminded me a lot of what happened to Hattie McDaniel, born on Wichita Street in Wichita. Yeah. The first Black person to win an Oscar, and who also integrated her neighborhood, the Adams neighborhood in Los Angeles. And Lauren Miller, a Black lawyer who went to Washburn, helped her. But they were fighting very similar issues, right? And I felt terrible for her. You know, Black actors don't have a lot of roles to choose from. Everyone's not Denzel Washington, where they could turn down roles that aren't, you know, culturally edifying, right? So then she gets this role. And the movie was wonderful, and most of the reviews were wonderful. But then people came for her then because they began to say that it was a whitewash of the slave trade. And I've had this debate with lots of people, close friends in media in particular. I just don't think that you can go to the movies and expect true history just because of the art form.
The art form.
But if you want history, there's plenty of history in books. But as soon as you start trying to do history through the movies, you know, there's going to be some corner that's cut. And I felt terrible for her when that happened because she couldn't win. She did The Help and got criticized. She did The Woman King, criticized again. very unfair. And I mean, she is a dynamite actress.
Super.
She really stole the show in that movie Doubt. I don't know if you saw Doubt.
She did. She sure did.
It
Yes.
was amazing.
She was
But
amazing.
that was kind of on my mind when I was watching The Woman King, and I was glad that it was. And I just had very low expectations of the historical accuracy for the movie. But I do have to tell you that I have tried to drum this knowledge into my kids, and that there have been times where I wondered if it was smart on my part as a parent to lead my kids through these kinds of discussions and through these kinds of subjects. There was a part of me that almost felt like I was robbing them of some of their innocence in childhood by revealing these awful truths about the world, but I didn't want them punched in the face later. You know, that dissonance where you feel like you're a good person, and then the society treats you like you're not for no reason other than the amount of melanin that you have in your skin. And I just didn't want that for them. But that's always the challenge. But my oldest twin said, "Dad, I can't believe you went to see that movie."
Wow.
So, you know, that was part of the slave trade. And it does require a little bit of digging. And I'll say this, and then, you know, anyone else can jump in. While that is true, and while I think the role of the king in the film and the role of the warrior women, both of those roles were sanitized, I am not convinced, and I think there's ample research to show that no one in Africa understood exactly the kind of slavery that we had here.
That's right.
You know, most of us go through school and we'll learn about slavery, and we'll learn about the slave owner, and we'll learn about the slave trader. But it's interesting to me how historians have avoided the slave breaker. And that's the most brutal part of slavery to me. People had to be taken to islands and have their spirits broken.
Wow.
Before they could be sold into slavery.
Wow.
And that's been hidden from everyone. There's still not a movie about it. And this comes from the logs of people who are involved in this evil business. We won't be able to sell these people into slavery because, you know, they may have spoken several different languages. They may have been very learned people. They may have been really proud people. You have to break someone down to the point where even though they outnumber you, they're too terrified to rise up.
Wow.
No one in Africa knew about the almost industrialized brutalization and rape that was going on here. I think that was unique to this hemisphere.
Yeah.
So when people say, "Oh, well, you know, you were selling your own people," well, yes, but we weren't aware of what was really happening here. If you think that's impossible, how many people here know about slave breakers?
Right.
The seasoning. It was called seasoning. How many people know about that? You know, I had a couple of coworkers who had a boss from South Carolina, and he was white. My coworkers were black, and he had invited my coworkers over to his house, and he had a mask, a little iron mask on the mantle. He was very proud of it. He had dug it up in his backyard, and a couple of them came to me and they were telling me about this mask, and I said, "You know what? I bet it was a sugarcane mask." And so when slaves were made to work in the cane brake in South Carolina, in the hot South Carolina sun, they didn't want the slaves eating the sugarcane, so they made them wear these masks. Well, in all that heat, it became like a little oven. It would burn the flesh off their faces. I just thought that was a macabre thing to have on your mantle. He had no idea what that was. Most people don't have any idea what that was. And I think a lot of that is on purpose. In the same way people created this hysteria about critical race theory, which isn't taught in schools, in order to hide and obfuscate and deny. I think this was done routinely with our history.
Yeah.
I think that's the challenge.
Yeah.
To break through that and have some really honest conversations about what happened. But don't go to the movies.
Wow.
Looking for that information.
Amen.
Wow.
I tell people all the time that you should use fiction, movies, even secular music, just music at large, as an opportunity to either dig deeper or for a conversation.
Absolutely. It's a starting point.
It's a starting point.
Basic starting point. And we look to each one of those genres to teach our children or to teach our community, and we're failing when we don't use them as opportunities to open doors and share information.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. Man, you just did one of the most brilliant.
See, people are going to think I'm paying you.
No, they're not. They're listening to you themselves right now. But you just did a brilliant socio-critical review of a movie. That was absolutely wonderful. What's interesting is so let's go to the others. Don't go into detail on Till yet. Just kind of, and then do what kind, because I want to come back and do that deeper conversation that you and I were having.
Sure.
And we talked about the physical reaction, the emotional and physical reaction we had to that movie.
Yeah.
But just talk quickly about Wakanda Forever and then Till. Just
if you don't mind, I'll add Black Panther to Wakanda Forever.
Yes.
That was quite a moment for me and my sons when we went to go see it. I'd never seen them so excited about a movie. They really liked Red Tails when we went to go see it, but this was different. They were buzzing, and there was something about the way the movie was put together that transformed them, I felt like. We stopped and we ordered a couple of pizzas, and while the pizzas were being made, we were having a conversation. I was explaining to them that the enormous wealth that is being portrayed in the first movie and in this sequel is not a fantasy, that Africa had that kind of wealth. And but for colonialism, it would still exist. And it made sense to them. It also made them feel good to see these wonderful, beautiful images, not just of themselves and their culture, but of Africa. They'd never seen that before. This was very, very important to them, and it was important culturally. Although I do think the part I just shared with you about the uniform plunder of Africa is not something that people understand. They don't understand that it happened in the past and that it's happening right now. And those of us, with some insight understand it. I just wish there was a way we could make more people aware that that's really what Ryan Coogler was doing with the movie. And when he had Shuri tell the white American agent, "Don't sneak up on me like that, colonizer." that's the point they were trying to drive home.
Right.
It's beautiful, beautiful, beautiful movie. I did wonder though. It did make me think about the current scandal on the Los Angeles City Council.
Wow. Wow.
where
Wow.
there were Hispanic council people concerned that African American council people were amassing too much power.
Yeah.
And that in Los Angeles, the two cultures are clashing.
Yeah.
And have been for a long time.
Yeah.
You know, to my knowledge and in my experience, that wasn't so. I mean, I went to a school that was a third Hispanic, and we were all very close, loved each other. In Los Angeles, it's different. And it was just interesting that the director took Namor and made him Mesoamerican. It's very interesting.
Very interesting.
And it was almost like a kind of social commentary in and of itself. And in the same way that people might miss the nuance of it, they might be missing it in that movie.
Right. Wow. 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 Teal.
Wow. I don't know if I can avoid the talking point that you wanted me to avoid.
Yeah, just go with it. Go with it.
But I knew we'd be talking about it, and I had not seen it yet. And I wasn't sure I was going to see the movie. You know, being the father of sons, and we've talked about this before. When my son started driving, I thought I was going to have a nervous breakdown. They'd say, we're going to go to McDonald's or we're going to go to the gym. And I was terrified. It was hard to breathe until they were back home. So I went into the movie with all these reservations. What I think the movie does well, and what I appreciated, is that the story was so powerful, it needed no embellishment.
Right.
So at no point in the movie will you see an act of violence.
Right. Right. Right.
But the pall of violence and the fear and the racism is just as much a character. And it's unseen.
Yeah.
It's just as much a character in that film. And there were moments that were so difficult. I've never had this happen to me before. You know, I've only cried, in 3 movies. I cried when Suge Avery was singing God's Trying to Tell You Something. He was standing there in front of her father, and he was like slowly boy, that gets me every time. I don't sob, I'll just, a tear will escape.
Right. Right.
That was the first. And then when I saw 4 Little Girls, Spike Lee's documentary about the girls killed in the 16th Street Baptist Church, I sobbed.
Yeah.
Sobbed. Particularly when the mother said that she went down to identify her child's body. And there was a white woman there calling her gal. So even in this worst moment in her life, this person couldn't extend to her, the respect of being a person. But there were moments where people were filing past the open casket, and there's this outpouring of grief, and I didn't realize it, but my face was wet. I'd started crying involuntarily. It was very difficult to get through, and I had a terrible headache when I left. I had to take a mouthful of Advil in the parking lot before I, started driving. I had a physical reaction to it. That was good filmmaking. And despite how wrenching it was, despite how wrenching 12 Years a Slave was, all of this was sanitized.
Yeah.
It was much worse.
Right. Right.
It was much worse.
Much worse. Much worse. Much worse.
Mm.
Wow.
It was tough.
Well, I share that. I tell. So I went to see it with Linda, and what happened to both of us. I think it happened to both of us, but because when I was on my sabbatical back in August, just so happens that I decided to go through that part of Mississippi. I had gone to see my parents, which is
wow.
South Central Mississippi. And on my way back, I went through that part. Just, hey, I'm going to do some, wanted to go see the place, Fannie Lou Hamer's birthplace,
Mm,
amazing work.
mm,
Medgar Evers, which I'll talk about, that his connection in the movie, that was another point where I just couldn't take it, because every time they show him on screen, I think about what ends up happening to him,
mm,
and how I took my daughters and we stood in that place, Mark, and we
mm,
stood in the spot where he finally collapsed. He was trying to crawl into his house, and he collapsed on the steps, and that's where his kids found him. And
mm,
so to see that on, and that his wife, they indicate in the movie, we don't know how historically true these conversations were, but that based upon what had happened to the Reverend Lee and to a couple other people, civil rights workers, that Myrtle Evers had this sense of foreboding and impending doom. And as she watched what was happening with the Emmett Till deal, she just felt this. And so that they indicated that in it, but I couldn't take that. But that the moment in which when they bring the casket and she sees the casket and she says, "Get him out, he can't breathe, and get him out the box."
mm.
And then she starts crying out, saying, "God, what do you like? God." Basically, what she's saying is, "God, why would you allow this? What like, my God, like, if there's something
God, what do you want me to do?
what do you want me to do? Like, if there's something you want from me, like, get it. Like, what? Like, why this?"
Mm-hmm.
And then the moment when the aunt says, "I can't look," and she says, "You have to," and the aunt looks, and she just, and it was like,
Yeah.
that woman, she deserves a best supporting actress, because
Most definitely.
what she does in that moment to me was like a profound expression of the pain of what it means to be Black in America. I mean, you heard, it was like you heard in her in an acting moment of grief.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think she was acting.
I think she dug somewhere very deep.
I think she
dug
had to go
very deep.
somewhere and let out a lifetime of grief.
Of grief. And so what happened to Yolanda, Pastor Yolanda, what is that Linda and I, we grew up in this world. So we grew up in Mississippi, and we heard the stories of Emmett Till. So I was born in 66, Linda 67. And we've talked about how we grew up in this world where adults would say things to us like, "You better start cutting up. Those white folks don't come get you out your house. You better stop cutting up. They're gonna find your body in the Pearl River." We grew up with that, but we never saw. And so when we saw the movie, it was like through like this hidden trauma that had been spoken into us came alive on the screen. And it was like, this is why adults were so terrorized in our childhood. Yes.
You know what I thought the movie did well? As I said, the director was adamant there won't be a single act of violence on the screen. Right. But what was so powerful was how that act settled on the uncle.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
On the aunt.
Yeah.
On the boys.
Yeah.
The feeling of culpability. And they were not culpable.
Right.
And then my earliest, before I had really known too much about what happened with Emmett Till, I remember my father talking about what bothered him most was how Emmett's killers sat in court laughing and drinking pop.
Right.
That was a breaking point for me as they were coming out of the courtroom and they're walking in and they've got this mood about them and they're hanging their hats.
Yeah.
In this jovial manner. Yeah. And you just mentioned father. For probably half a day afterwards, I couldn't really talk about it. Then I started doing research. And then I was upset with myself because I wanted to find out what was real. What did they leave out? And the first thing that I did was, where was his father? I wanted to really find out where was his father. Are you guys familiar with the story of his father?
Mm-hmm.
And then I cried for a whole another evening, realizing that his father was executed in a similar manner by our own government.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the last part that I wanted to share tonight about this was just how my mind immediately went to Trayvon Martin
Yes.
and Tamir Rice,
Yes.
and how it's not the public necessarily anymore committing these acts. That in some of these cases, they're public servants. Tamir Rice was 12. Yeah, I had that same sense of outrage about Trayvon Martin's killer walking.
Yeah.
And gloating.
And the people who are constantly telling us, well, things are so much better. Things are so much better. Just reminded me of what Malcolm said. If you put a knife in my back 9 inches and pull it out 7.
Right. Right.
And our terror is real. Yeah. And this is a real pet peeve of mine, but people want to have discussions about race and white supremacy now. And they're really not equipped to have these conversations because they don't really understand the history.
Right. Right.
And I've been encouraged to be a part of these discussions. And I said, I can't, because I don't really think that you understand it.
Yeah.
And like Neely Fuller used to say, until you understand white supremacy and its real and utter dimensions, everything else about this society is going to confuse you. And then when you understand it, oh, okay. Yeah. And so our terror is real. Those of us who have sons, our terror is real.
It's real. It's real.
And I think that's why her grief, all the grief that was on that screen, just got to me the way it did.
It did.
From the moment they were in the store.
Yes.
From the moment they were in the store. And being raised overseas, I shared this with Pastor Johnson. In the history books that we were taught from, of course, this isn't one of those stories, but coming back to the States and learning and being surrounded by images such as these and living on the outskirts, moving my sons to the outskirts of Wichita, hoping to provide them with some sense of safety from the streets of the street called Volusia, calling them, and then subjecting them to a whole different kind of terror. When they begin dating, the first thing that I show them is a picture of Emmett Till. And the fact that we have to have conversations with our sons and sit them down and basically, I don't know about you, but the young women that my sons would bring home, I would threaten. And I would have to give intense conversations that does your father know that my son is African American, that he's Black? And living with that angst over a period of time kills a part of you. You're always, the phone can ring closer to the end at night, and there's this automatic dread.
There's not a moment in that movie, Pastor Yo, where Emmett Till's mother is not distraught. She's distraught before he leaves.
It's like she knew.
Yeah.
And I shared that with Pastor Johnson. From the moment she came on the screen, walking into that store, being treated as if she didn't belong, and her trying to keep her eye on him, I just felt it. I was stressed. I was relieved to get out of the theater.
Yeah. There was something subtle in there too that reminded me about conversations that I've either been a part of or have witnessed. When she's on the stand, the judge asks her, if she'll be all right talking about this. Will she be okay? I did a column for the Kansas Reflector a couple weeks ago. And if you remember, leading up to the midterms, one of the parties was really hammering the idea about crime. And we got to keep our people safe. White Americans are the safest people on
In the
the
world.
planet.
You are exactly correct.
Why is crime so important when you're that
When you're that
safe?
safe. When you're that safe.
You know,
Just a proxy for race. That's all it is.
Wow. So you mentioned the movies you've cried at. You cried. The first movie I cried at, and it caught me off guard, was Gladiator. And it
Really?
caught me off guard. When after at the end of the movie, when he gets revenge, he kills the guy, but then the guy had stabbed him before the fight begins, and so he's dying, and he starts seeing his wife
Yeah.
in the field of grain, and he knows, and the black guy had kept telling him, "You will see her again, but not yet." So now he knows that now is the time that he's done, and that he's going to see his wife and son again. And I had gone in the middle of the day. It was in Houston, and it was nothing but men in the theater, and the whole theater, men were sniffling. And so in that environment, I cried on that movie. And then the other movie I remember crying on was the next, but I didn't cry like this movie. I like what you call sobbing. I was sobbing to the point that Linda said, "Do we need to leave?" It was that bad. And then I went to see it again, Mark, with some singers of St. Mark. We bought tickets for the singers, took them to see it. They were crying. And when they started crying, I thought that, okay, I've seen it. It won't hit me. Do you know that I cried all over again? It was, and I just think it was, I was having a conversation with someone recently. They talked about how we have all this pent up trauma in our bodies and in our beings, that things will trigger and it'll get released, and we're like, where is this coming from? And it's just trauma that we haven't processed, that we've been unconscious, but then it starts coming out and it gets released. And so I think that's part of what happened. And that movie did that for me. Yeah.
One of the thoughts that I was having in the movie, now that you say that, was, from the beginning of my journalism career, I was always really outspoken.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to write about all these kinds of issues. I remember writing once about this experience that I had when I was, I don't know, I must have been about Emmett Till's age. A cop arrested me right in front of my house on Volusia.
Wow.
Pulled me off my bike. I didn't even have shoes on. Pulled me off the bike by my neck, and cuffed me. And supposedly I had robbed a dog and shake. There used to be a dog and shake at 21st and Hillside. And that whole experience. And because of what I was writing and all those things, my mother was always terrified for me. And it's only been all these years later that I can, and being a parent now, understand just what that is like. It's just, I don't know. It's beyond words.
I think that's what you saw on the screen, Pastor Johnson, when she was at the casket, when the aunt was at the casket, just what you expressed. That built up trauma in her body over time, that fear that she's probably had for her own family members over the course of time. And I don't think it ever goes away. I don't think it doesn't matter how old our children get.
But remember, Pastor Yo, when she was on the stand, and as she was leaving, she said, "They killed my baby again."
Yes.
Baby again. Yeah.
So when
that exists today, it exists today.
I know.
Because when it happened to Trayvon, everyone knew that guy was going to walk.
That's right.
When it happened to Tamir Rice, everybody knew that guy was going to walk. It's additional trauma.
Yeah.
About not mattering.
Yeah.
That, like Jesse Jackson used to say, that sense of nobodiness.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
And I think for even understanding that it's at the end of the day, it's all about power and maintaining that power. There's
Mhm.
still, I just don't understand how you can have that vitriol, hate for another human being.
Well, you know, speaking, that's a great question, Yolanda. One of my favorite theologians, who's practical. He's a practical theologian, Pastor Yolanda. You will like him. His name is Walter Wink, and he did a series called "Naming the Powers, Unmasking the Powers," and he talks about the concept of evil, and he talks about, you know, it comes from a Pentecostal background, is you know, that, you know, the devil in some circles, church circles, but he talks about how that you don't have to give up a grasp of the concept of evil because you're progressive. If you're a more modern thinker, and he talks about how people behave in group dynamics in ways that they do not behave individually.
Yeah,
So
the mob mentality.
yes, the
Yes.
mob mentality. Yeah, exactly. And so there are things that people individually, if just one on one, they don't think that way. But this mob mentality gets created, and these evil things happen. Profound work, really great work. Mark, tell the story. You tell me a story, and then we'll switch, and then we'll end in a different place.
Okay.
But I want you share with me a story about the president of the Wichita chapter of
Mhm.
the NAACP going to Mississippi during that time. Tell that story.
Yeah, my dear friend, Dr. Gretchen Ike, in her book Descent in Wichita, which is a marvelous rendering of what was happening in terms of civil rights in Wichita and in the Midwest, talked about Chester Lewis going to Mississippi during this time with a group of other NAACP branch presidents. And he saw that beast that we're talking about. And that the pall of violence there, the fear, the intimidation was so thick that when he returned to Wichita, he didn't come out of his room for about 2 weeks. Could not come out of his room for 2 weeks. Just terrified by what he saw. That really speaks to, he said he'd never experienced anything like that. Never seen anything like that before. And that's really all you need to understand. The vice on power that people like that had, where there were Klansmen, there were white citizens councils who received public funds. It's just terrifying.
Yeah.
But I mean, that story stayed with me all these years. After learning about it.
Story. That is a powerful story.
Mm-hmm.
One other thing I wanted to mention about that. So to me, one of the ways that I see how deeply infected we are with the evil of white supremacy and colonialism is the reaction that I got from many of my Black friends to the movie Teal, and they left the movie with all of the tragedy, the beast that you see in that movie, that you never see the actual happening, but you see the results of it. That they left the movie asking two questions. Number one, saying, why did those Black men help? So the night they come to pick him up, do you see the Black men? And then number two is that, did he really whistle at her? And I'm like, man, that's how twisted many Black people are by this system, Mark.
Mm-hmm.
What kids whistle at things all the time, all over America. It's part of what it means to be a kid. That does not justify what happened to Emmett Till. If he whistled at her 1,000 times, what happened to him was uncaused and was an evil, unjust act. And then in terms of those men, they explain that in the movie, the men point out that they were field hands. If you know anything about sharecropping, which was just a half step above slavery.
Mm-hmm.
If you had a family and you were sharecropping for your family to survive, that's why that system lasted so long.
Well, the character preacher was Mo's right.
Right.
And he put it perfectly when he said it wasn't just two white men at my door with a gun. It was the whole state of Mississippi.
The whole state of
Every judge, every senator, every cop was at my door.
Was at my door. Exactly. Exactly. Exactly.
Okay.
So I want to, it's 8:25. We're going to let Mark go. This is amazing. Mark is always, so I want to do something, you know, we won't broadcast next week, folks. Folks want you to enjoy Thanksgiving, but we'll come back. But at some other point during the holidays, I'd like to bring Mark back and we'll do something a little different. We'll talk cultural stuff. We'll talk history, but we'll talk maybe about the holidays and some holiday themes.
Some happy stories.
Some happy stories.
So everyone should feel giddy.
So everybody can feel giddy, exactly. But I do want to give a quick reflection to you all about why, as a pastor, and why on this broadcast we have these kinds of conversations. So if you listen to me, I say this relentlessly, that for me, learning the Bible and becoming a person of the Bible is not just sitting in a room in a church building reading scripture. It's about integrating that scripture into my worldview, to my perspective, to how I do politics, to how I do husbanding, fathering, how I do behave as a son, as a brother, as a friend. It gets integrated in all that. And so when we do Ignite, it's a chance for us to practice the craft of integration, of theological integration, where we take our rootedness in a God perspective, and we think about everyday issues that people are facing. So that's why we do it. The second thing I want to tell you is that we just so happen to focus on some Black issues that impact African Americans. But I want you all to know the ACLU is fighting for the rights of all people: Black, white, yellow, red, poor, rich, neo-Nazis, the rights of those people in the same way that as St. Mark, we care about all people. Tonight, we were focusing on some issues related to Black African Americans, but I care about the infant mortality, the Black infant mortality rate. Wichita has the highest Black infant mortality rate in the nation. I care
67214 zip code where the church is.
Where the church is, in the 67214 zip code, where we are, St. Mark. And so I went to a DART meeting, and they asked us to break apart and say, what keeps you up at night, or what wakes you up in the morning? Like, what are the cries of your community? And that came up. And so, and what was sad, Mark, is that all the pastors, pretty much, we all said, what breaks the heart of your congregation? What keeps them up? What are they crying about? And unfortunately, many of us said that what our people are worried about is, how do I keep my church alive? Not about the infant mortality rate, not about the gang violence, not about all the issues that are impacting people, the lack of medical care, payday loans where people are being charged 400% to 700% for interest on loans. Not that, but how do we? But the thing about it, Jesus, who founded the church, says that if you want life, you find life by giving up your life. It is not by fighting for the survival of an organization that we survive. It's by fighting for the people that Jesus cared about. And so we care about all. Tonight, we just happen to be talking about issues that impact Black people, but we care about all people.
But Rev,
part of what we do is we want to lift up those issues on Wednesday nights and bring them to your consciousness, so that at minimum you'll start praying about them and asking God to show us ways that we can help relieve pain, relieve oppression, give people light, and help people come alive to who they truly are created to be. Mark, you about to jump in?
But Rev, I mean, everything that we discussed today, these racial issues, systemic racism, white supremacy, these are moral issues.
Moral issues, yes.
Where better to deal with moral issues than at the church?
And in the context of the church. Amen. My brother, you are amazing. I appreciate you so much. I appreciate your friendship. I appreciate your brilliance, your historical, your perspective and brilliance. We pray for you that God will keep you and your family strong. So I'd like to have you back on sometime between now and the end of the year, just to kind of do something around the holidays, and then maybe come back in around sometime mid-January and do something around the MLK holiday. And let's talk about that in historical. Because I know you got tons of stories that we've never heard around MLK and that whole thing.
These conversations, do wonders for my spirit too. And I appreciate you both.
Absolutely. All right, folks. Thank you all so much for tuning in. St. Mark, we'll see you on Sunday. Wear your mask. If you want to wear your mask, wear your mask. You don't have to, but if you want to wear your mask, and let's come out, let's worship together, and give thanks to God for this year and for what we expect for the coming year. God bless you all. Have a wonderful night. Mark, I will follow up with you later, sir.
Great.
Great.
Take care. Bye-bye.